clients access to the best human capital management and due diligence tools available. They are dedicated to helping their clients with all of their people-related decisions. To learn more, go to www.peopleg2.com. Talent Talk centers on the topics of talent recruitment and management, leadership development, company culture, and employee engagement. These are all timely topics for CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR professionals, and business leaders. We hope that as you tune in to listen each week, whether to the live broadcast or to the podcast on iTunes or iHeartRadio, that you hear something you can take away that will help you grow and impact your career in a positive way. And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, the founder and CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in here to Talent Talk. And joining me, I'm actually in studio live today, which is a little change for me. Yeah, I'm usually calling in from Skype or whether I'm at home or on the road or whatever, but it's nice to be in the studio, and my first guest as well as in the studio, so we should have a good show. I've met so many kind of, I call them cool and inspiring leaders at different events and groups and things that I have the privilege of being involved in, and today is a great example of that. And so I meet these people, and we end up having these really cool conversations, and really that's where the radio show kind of came out of, was, hey, let's have this conversation together live and on the radio so that other people can hear it. Maybe they can learn something. Maybe they can think of something new to do. Maybe start another dialogue within their company based on some of the things that we're talking about and thinking about as far as helping companies, helping our culture, helping our employees and our talent and everything else that my guests seem to be interested in. So we are, if you're listening live, we're also streaming this. OC Talk Radio on Facebook is streaming this live as well, and we'll repost that later so you can see this interview on video if you'd like. But as I mentioned, Talent Talk is live every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and most of you kind of come in on afterwards and check us out on iTunes, listen to us on iHeartRadio, and really just so happy. We're averaging over 10,000 people a day downloading one of our podcasts and from one of the different platforms, and just a big thank you to everyone who's showing up and participating. But speaking of participating, we're really working on wanting to take more of you to kind of jump in on the conversation, and we can do that on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, whether you're listening live or after the show's already aired, ask us a question, give us a comment, give us some feedback, ask one of our guests a question. All of that is great. My producer, Mike, will try to feed me in any of the live questions into the show, and we can see if we can trip up any of our guests. Well, we don't really, we're not that kind of show. We're not going to try to trip anybody up, but maybe we'll get a good question and get the dialogue going a little deeper. So my first guest today in studio will be Pattie. No, do we say, is it Grimm?
Pattie Grimm, just like Grimm's Fairy Tales and Grimm the TV show.
And you know, I look at it and I want to say Grime, but that's wrong. There's two M's. It's Grimm. But I have a habit of messing everyone's names up on this show, so it's the inner demon in my head that's trying to get me to say it wrong. But she's an author, speaker, radio show host here, even on the station, and also a coach. So we're going to get to talk to her in depth. After she's done, my second guest will be Jim Palmer. He's the founder of Dream Business Coaching's program, and he's written a book and also runs the Dream Business Academy, and we'll get more from him later. But Pattie, welcome to the show, and welcome to the other side of the desk.
Well, this is kind of funny because my show's Friday at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock every Friday, and I'm usually on the other side. So this is really the first time I think I've been on this side or recently been on this side of the mic, and so it's kind of weird.
It's kind of like that time when someone else drives your car and you're sitting in the passenger seat going, this isn't right.
Yes, and you're braking, and why aren't they stopping?
So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, all the cool things about you that we should know.
Let's see. I can start out with I was born in Wheeling West by God, Virginia.
Wow.
And that's actually what the sign says going in and out of town. You're coming into or leaving Wheeling West by God, Virginia. But grew up mostly in California. My dad moved here when I was quite young. And so was a middle child in a middle-class family, basically grew up around here. Very sports-oriented family, very into sports and cars. Played tennis from the time I was 7. Played softball, volleyball, a whole bunch of different sports. And when I graduated from college, I started out as a teacher. I was going to be a teacher at North Torrance High School. Well, California passed Proposition 13, which laid off all new teachers. So I went to my godfather, who was a big wig at Bank of America, and said, I need a job. Well, I got into banking, and I fell in love with it, and I was a vice president of First Interstate Bank. I got to create my own title. So my title was Vice President of Customer and People Excellence for all of Southern California for the bank. And so I was a vice president, 28 years old. A couple years later, the bank had gone through a big culture change. I loved what I was doing, and so I went to my VP, who said I could have any job I wanted, and I said none of them. I'd like to come back and train all of your leaders to be leaders and how to be better at what they do in their jobs, etc. So I walked out, had my consulting company for 10 years, almost 12 years, moved to Seattle, got hired by Microsoft. So I was hired by Microsoft to change their enterprise sales teams from being what our customers called brains on a stick to being solution sellers, relationship sellers, and I was at Microsoft for 15 years. When I retired 4 years ago, I was down here at the local beach with my brother-in-law and sister, and my brother-in-law said, if you retired from Microsoft, why are you still living in Seattle? We went home, put the house on the market, sold the house in 2 weeks, and basically moved back to California.
Well, welcome back to California. I'm glad you came back. That's good. It's a great little story there, and a good foundation to kind of understand who you are and where you're kind of coming from. I know one of the hats you wear, because you do a lot of different things, is you did kind of get back into teaching eventually, right? Now you're instructor for Brandman University, where you teach change management and leadership and team development. So maybe what are some of the cutting edge ideas that you're really looking at in that role right now? Well,
part of what I'm doing is I'm really focusing my business on helping organizations attract, retain, and motivate their top women leaders. And so my book, which is on Amazon, which I will plug and hold up, is called Quiet Women Never Change History, Be Strong, Stand Up, Stand Out, with the subtitle of Let's Go Kick Some Glass, which has really become my branding. That's why I'm always dressed in red. I wear red high heels to really focus on how women can go about kicking glass and not kissing it.
Right. Well, and I think that's a really important message that you're kind of giving, to be strong. There's so many mixed messages, what we expect.
Right.
With gender roles, things that how we expect people to approach things. And sometimes it's not just women, it's anybody in the organization about standing up and saying something and being strong and not, taking the path of least resistance. But I like how you're focusing in on a particular group of people, because they probably need the most help.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is people don't really realize this. In fact, I had somebody ping me on Facebook after the Women's March and said, well, what did women actually lose? The fact is we actually really never gained it. Women's pay is still 80% for Caucasian women of what men make for the same job. So imagine making 80 cents on a dollar versus what your male counterpart is making. Women's pay has only gone up 1% in the last decade. So at this rate of change, it will take 179 years for women to achieve pay equality. The numbers for African American Asian women are 60 and 53, which is even worse.
Right, it's even worse, right.
So doing things specifically within organizations and helping women become self-empowered. So my book outlines 5 key things women can do, some things organizations can do, and some things men can do.
Well, what are some of those things, if you don't mind? We don't want to give away the whole book, but maybe we could talk about, in general, some of the things that you're suggesting.
Yeah, well, the book has very specific exercises in it, and as you said, some of these things apply to men as well as women. So the first one is be strong. So the first one is know what your strengths are, and I walk people through a process of how to figure out their strengths, or I recommend they buy the book Strength Finder, anything by Marcus Buckingham, or they take a DISC profile, DISC profile, any of those to figure out their strengths. Because if you find career and job opportunities that fit your strength, you're going to be more productive, you're going to contribute more to the organization, you're going to get recognized, and you'll have a whole lot less stress, because everybody is born with a certain strength, like you're born left-handed or right-handed. And while you can do the opposite, your strengths are really what's going to help you be more productive. So that's number one.
Yeah, and I love the right-hand, left-hand thing, because no one walks around telling you if you're right-handed, you really should work on your left hand more. You really should try to be able to write more with your left. Nobody says that.
Yeah.
Right? But yet we show up to work and they're like, you're not so good at programming. You should really work on. No, I'm a communicator, or whatever it is that you're good at, right?
Right. And the idea behind the whole thing with Strength Finder is if you practice focusing on, improving your weaknesses, you're going to get average at best. And you'll never feel comfortable.
Right.
You can write with your other hand. It just feels ridiculous.
Right.
If you focus on your strengths, you're going to improve at quantum leaps. So that's number one. Number two is to stand up. And this can go for anybody. In order to stand up, you need a foundation to stand on. And I help people write their own personal leadership vision.
Right.
So in a combination with your strengths and your vision, you should find organizations that match that so you can be more productive. So my personal vision is to make a difference and empower people to reach their full potential. And I walk people through a process of take a piece of paper, go to your favorite place, the beach, which is mine, the mountains, the garden, outside a meditation room, and imagine in 5 years somebody's going to write an article or do a story about you. And what do you want that to say? And I tell people to kind of fine-tune that over a period of time and eventually come down to a sentence about 12 words or less and use that to make your decision. So how I used that recently was when I was working at Microsoft, because I was there for 15 years, and I still do consulting for them. I kind of do my old job part-time. I had a choice of going to Asia to run the Asia Pacific Customer and Sales Excellence team, or going to Europe and running the Business and Sales Excellence team. Equal pay, great reporting relationship, everything was equal except one thing. Asia had 160 people on the headquarters staff to service 14 countries with about 20 different languages. Europe had 1,000 people. Now, where do you think I'd have the biggest chance to make a difference and help people reach their full potential? Asia was easy.
Right.
Yeah, I literally called my husband from this big conference I was working at and I was actually speaking at, and he knew we were going back and forth between Germany and Singapore, basically, and I said, you know, pack the house, you got 4 weeks, we got to move. And he said, do I pack flip-flops or snowshoes? And I said, pack the flip-flops. Number 3 is stand out.
Mm-hmm.
So women in particular need to be more valuable, more visible, and more vocal. That comes across in negotiating for salary, for pay, for the job you deserve, for time off, any of those kinds of things. But be valuable first based on your strengths and your vision. Really focus on the things you bring to the table and become invaluable to your organization. And then be more visible and be more vocal. This applies to women but also to men. If you're waiting for somebody to tap you on the shoulder and say, Chris, here's your next promotion, would you like it? You're going to be waiting a really long time.
Right.
And women don't tend to, you know, stand up enough about some of those things and say, I did this. If a woman does something well, she'll generally say, my team did this. And there's a way you can do that that's very empowering to your team, but also to being able to say the word I. So what you can say is, you know, say to a manager or senior person, you gave me a very difficult task to do. I pulled together my team. My team and I pull together this solution, and here's what I'm presenting to you on behalf of my team. So you've used the word I.
Right. You certainly are still a team player, but yet you've angled it enough to show them your value. Yeah. And it's surprising to me that we don't spend any sort of time, especially in business schools or whatever, to help people be able to articulate these types of things, right?
Yeah.
How do you we're not asking you to be an overly political animal. We're not asking you to be
kiss tail.
Right, kiss tail. But you know, it doesn't hurt to let people know what you've done well, and also to be honest and open about your failures or your mistakes or what you've learned or whatever it is, so that people can trust you and feel like you're going to be a great person to move up in organizations.
Yeah, I encourage people to keep a gratitude file, right? I have one on my computer and one actually a physical file in case my computer ever crashes. You hate to have that happen, but it does happen. And anytime I get a compliment letter from somebody, oh, that was a great speech or a great workshop or you really helped me, I keep all of those in a file. Now, when I worked within an organization, when it came time to write my performance review, I had a year's worth of evidence of here's all the things that I did. Here's the project that came in on time under budget. Here are the facts of what I did. You know, here are the things that I did. And then you've got more ways to show that you're doing well. I also used the file when I was having a really bad day, to kind of open it up and go, I'm okay.
Right. Today might be bad, but the last 3 months were pretty good.
No, pretty good.
Yeah.
So number 4 is, especially for women, is be number 1 on your things to do list. You cannot give away what you do not own. And so just like on the airplane, put on you're getting on a plane today, put on your oxygen mask first before you help somebody else.
And you know, that might be the best piece of advice I've heard in a long time, especially for women.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is, I'm sure someone smarter than me could tell us if this is a genetic thing, is this a social thing, something that women learn, but it certainly seems like a majority of women have this instinct, right, this natural thing to help someone else first, like to put the kid's mask on first, right? My wife would probably put our kid's mask on first and then pass out because she was doing theirs, right? And yet in the workplace, that's killing them.
Yeah, it's killing them.
Right.
It almost killed me. So I tell my story. You know, Paul's heard this a number of times. I had 14 great years at Microsoft. I went from getting my biggest raise, biggest bonus, biggest amount of stock options in 1 year to all of a sudden being a crash and burn. I literally crashed and burned so hard, which is one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to prevent other women from crashing and burning. And what I had done is stop taking care of myself. I wasn't doing the things I needed to do with my vision. I wasn't following my value. I wasn't following my spirituality. I was doing everything for everybody else, and I imploded and took a 4-month leave of absence and sabbatical to figure out my next career move. And so I tell people, you've got to take care of yourself. Eat, pray, love, meditate, whatever, develop yourself. Read your own, read books that are in your area. Do things to take care of yourself, because
and probably follow your own advice, right?
Yeah, really. That's what I did, right? I mean, I crashed, but I came back
for
even
anybody,
stronger.
they're probably out there telling people you should be doing this, but not doing it themselves, right?
Exactly. My favorite was my mentor when I was at Microsoft. It was this wonderful woman, and it was after one of these big meetings where there are obviously Starbucks cups everywhere, because we were in Seattle, Redmond area. So after the meeting, there were all these Starbucks cups. And being a woman, I started to pick up all the cups. And my mentor from the corner of the room literally yells, "Put the cups down." And I kind of stopped and sort of paused for a second. She goes, "When you pick up the cups, you look like an admin." And I hadn't even thought about it. She goes, "Everybody has a mother. You don't have to take care of everybody else. You should be taking care of yourself." And the final one is pay it forward. So a friend of mine, Michelle Berquist, has a group called Connected Women of Influence, and she interviewed 500 men about the biggest mistake women make that sabotage their careers, according to men. The number one thing is women tend to compete and push each other down versus help collaborate and lift each other up. And so, pay it forward is be a mentor, regardless of your age. If you're a millennial, you can be mentoring girls in college, or even in groups like Girls Inc., where you're working with middle school girls. So be a mentor, find a mentor, either a man or a woman. Both are equally great, and raise brave girls, which is something dads and women can do, is raise brave girls to be risk takers, not perfectionists. Because some of that caring you talked about really comes down to girls are still raised to be perfectionists, even in sports.
Right.
Watch a girls' soccer team, watch a boys' soccer team. Watch a girls' softball team, watch a boys' softball team. The girls have to be dressed perfectly with a little ribbon in their hair, has to be the right color, and if the girl falls down, everybody runs over and says, "Oh, Susie, are you okay?" The boy shows up, shoes don't match, socks don't match, uniform's probably dirty, their hair's probably not combed, and they probably even haven't brushed their teeth.
Yeah.
And he falls down, and we all go, "Johnny, get up, you're not hurt, walk it off."
Right. I had this argument. I used to coach a lot of women's athletics, and the referees will stop the game if a girl falls. I mean, it's just very sexist. If the boy fell down, you would just keep going. You would
just
have
run
ignored
over
the boy.
Exactly.
If the girl fell over, and you can see it in their faces. I've now called them out on it, and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
But it starts to sink in a little. But there's a totally different reaction when a girl gets hurt, if a boy gets hurt in those settings.
And so that perfectionism of little girls turns into procrastination. It turns into the imposter syndrome. I'm never good enough.
Right.
Like even Sheryl Sandberg, CEO of Facebook now, when she was going from Google to Facebook, and she wrote the book Lean In, great book, and I've met Sheryl. And so it's interesting that she said that even her at that level, she was COO of Google. She turned Google's culture around. She's talking to Mark Zuckerberg about her salary, and in her own mind, she's thinking, "Am I worth this?"
Right.
I mean, she's like the role model of one of the super successful women. So, getting over that imposter syndrome, I'm never good enough. A woman does a presentation, and there's one little typo, right? And it can throw her off her game during the meeting, but afterwards she's going to self-critique of, "Oh my gosh, I should have caught that." A guy does it, they're going to go, "Oh, isn't that funny? I spelled the word wrong."
Right.
And they're going to think they did a great presentation, high five, and go from there. So we have to work on those couple of components.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago about mentoring, and I think that's a really, really important point. I want to make sure we kind of go, maybe talk a little bit deeper. And unless maybe you're day one on the job, or you're at the last day of the job of your working career, right?
Right.
Those two extremes aside, I kind of feel like everybody should be mentoring somebody and being mentored by somebody.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And because it helps you grow so much in so many ways, to have someone who's pulling you along, and then someone who you're pulling along. I mean, it's just, and yet there are certainly organizations that do this well, and they talk about it. But it's almost like I don't. Maybe we need a cultural revolution or something for people to start thinking about doing this all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us have gone back and coached kids. Some of us have gone back and put ourselves in those roles, but most people don't.
Yeah.
And they don't want someone. They either don't seek it or they don't want someone to help them.
Yeah.
You know, they don't look stupid. They don't want to figure out themselves. I don't know what that is. Like, if there's a right answer, I want that answer. I don't care if I don't want to come up with it. Just tell me the right answer so I can save myself all this work and time.
You want somebody you can build a trusting relationship with that can not only tell you what you're doing well, but give you advice about what you could be doing differently. Right? That will sit down with you and help you work through some of those tough times, or even be a sounding board. My best mentors were two British gentlemen when I lived in Asia, and I'll never forget this. They came by my desk one day, and they were in these big offices, and we were all in cubicles, but we had the view of Singapore, right? All the cubicle people, cubies, right?
Right.
And they came to my desk and they said, "Are you happy?" Now, being a woman, my first response was, "Well, I was happy till you asked me that question." But they pulled me into their office and they said, "We want to make sure you're happy, and we want to put you on this executive potential program." And I was like, wow. And so they helped me throughout my whole time there. They would critique my PowerPoints. They would help me figure out my story. They would say, you know, you've got a great story, but there's too much here. Cut it in half.
Right.
So they were able to do that. And so, so people say, well, where do I find a mentor? I said, well, if you're in a company, look for somebody a couple levels above you, probably in another department, and ask them for coffee to start with, and say, you know, I really admire you. I'd love to know how you got to where you are.
Right.
And that can turn into a formal mentorship, or even just coffee once a month. Or you ask your mentor questions like, well, what should I be reading? What magazine should I read? What articles? Are there some classes I could take to round up my career? So use them as a sounding board. So it's a really important piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, it can be difficult to find that right person, but you're right. It takes just a small step.
Yeah.
Get coffee, have a conversation. I mean, that's how any of my mentors have been. No one like knocked on my door and said, "Hello, can I be your mentor, please?"
Yeah.
I mean, it just sort of happens, and suddenly you realize that they're your mentor, and then of course once you realize that, then you need to thank them and continue to feed that. But it's just one of those things. I don't know if we'll get to that point where everybody is doing that, and it's almost like with pay, with equal pay within the gender pay. You know, will we ever get there on our own, or do we need? Is this one of those times when government can come in and make a difference? Do we need a law that says it's got to be this way, right?
Well, Governor Brown just signed a bill that is basically to ensure equal pay for women, that you can no longer ask what somebody's salary was at their previous job, because if your salary was low, it's going to stay low. An interesting Harvard study had a group of recent Harvard graduates, so, you know, women and men at the top of their career and of their skills. 50% of the men asked for higher starting salary. Only 17% of the women did.
Right.
So they started out at $4,000 to $8,000 more than the women. So we have to do some things. And there's things organizations can do to help women. And there's things men can do. In my research, so I did about 3 years of research and interviewed lots of people.
The only problem with that is that companies aren't necessarily motivated to help women there, right? They'd rather save the money.
Well, yeah, and there's some things they can do that they don't have to spend a lot of money on, right?
So it's like it's almost like another force, or women themselves have to take that on, because companies are like, well, fine, if you want to work for $10,000 less, we'll take the money and pocket it over here, or put it in research and development, or whatever, or hire 3 more people. And so they're not going to come to you and say, you know, you're not really getting paid enough. I mean, the average company is not going to do that.
Well, some of the things we found in the research that I did with Catalyst and Gallup and McKinsey and all of those, because I interviewed over almost 2,000 people for my book, and then I also did all the other research. And what they say, that what makes exceptional workplaces for organizations to attract, motivate, and retain women, there's very similar parallels between women and millennials in the foundation things that they want. They want an organization with a mission, vision, and values they can believe in. So things like sustainability or things like company culture matter to them. They want a place where people are going to develop them. One of the reasons millennials tend to work better for women is that they tend to be better developers of people, from my research and other research. So they can focus on the mission, vision, values, and find people that fit those kinds of things. They can look at things like giving them opportunities to advance. Again, some of the research shows that men get promoted on potential, women get promoted on performance. So you've probably frequently heard, Chris, you'd make a great senior leader. You have the potential. Women have to prove themselves in a role and they have to perform to get promoted. And then once they get to that role, they need to prove themselves again. So you can start looking for women with potential to be senior leaders. I offer a series of workshops for women. That's a 6-month program. It's 1 workshop a month with some assignments in between and mentorship that you can develop your top women so that you keep them, because women are leaving the workforce in pretty big numbers. They're either finding their own company, they're going someplace else where they're going to be developed, that's got the right culture, or they're starting nonprofits, or they're just completely leaving the workforce. So we have to retain those women.
I use the sportscaster test as my kind of litmus test of whether or not we're making any progress, because I've heard over and over that ESPN and these different places, if a guy walks in, he played football at Ohio State, he's got a good voice, a liking, they pick him up. If a woman comes in, they give her like a 500 question thing about every stat, every sports thing, and it's just to prove that she's good enough and knows enough about sports to be there, but it's just assumed the guy knows enough because he played football at some well-known university, right?
Yeah.
And that's total crap.
Yeah, I grew up with a sports family, so my favorite times were going to Dodger games with my dad when I was 8 years, going to doubleheaders and never leaving a game early regardless of the score or rain.
I would never have done doubleheaders, so you're a better sports fan than
I was 8 years old with my little stat book out there, right? I'm married to a football coach. My son's a football coach. My Sunday is dedicated. Saturdays are dedicated to college football. Go Washington Huskies, go Dogs, and our Sundays are dedicated to football. And my life has been centered around a football field for the last 34 years.
Well, this has gone by so quickly. We are actually out of time. I want to really appreciate you, how much I appreciate you coming in and being on the other side of the desk and having this great conversation with us. How can people get a hold of you or learn more about you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so they can get my book, Quiet Women Never Change History, Be Strong, Stand Up, Stand Out. Let's Go Kick Some Glass. You can get that on Amazon. You can reach me at, easiest way is probably my email. It's pattiegrimm@live.com, and that's PATTIEGRIMM@LIVE.com. People can call me or text me. My cell is 425-289-6619. I do keynotes, workshops, webinars, a whole variety of things. Focused on leadership development overall and culture, but specifically recently in the last couple of years on bringing great women into the world and keeping them in the organizations.
Well, fantastic. I hope people check out your book, and thank you so much for being here. It's been a real pleasure, and we need to have you come back here pretty quick, and we'll just keep going.
Yeah, well, I've got a whole other book called Play the Game by Your Rules.
Oh, there we go. So
Powerful negotiation skills for women.
We'll bring you in for that one. Thank you so much. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
Thanks, Chris.
Imagine what it would feel like to lose everything. Your job, your home, your family, your dignity. This has happened to thousands of the men, women, veterans, and young adults we serve at Working Wardrobes. What do we do to help? We provide career development services, life skills workshops, job skills training. We provide the perfect interview outfit, and we get clients placed in jobs. Call Working Wardrobes, 714-210-2460. Donate, volunteer, invest, hire.
When it comes to pioneers in their respective industries,